Um, so with that, so just by way of introduction, let me just, mention a few things that I'm sure many of you have experienced and that kind of lead to tonight's topic about car control. If you think about trail braking, if you trail brake too much, the car can understeer or it can oversteer on corner entry, right? Think about that a minute. If you get on the brakes too hard going into a corner, back end can get light and want to come around. Or, there can be so much weight on the front that while you're trying to turn and brake, the car doesn't want to turn. On the other hand, if you don't trail brake enough, the car might understeer because there's not enough weight on the front. It might even oversteer if you don't trail brake enough. If you, pass the apex in a corner and get on the throttle a little too much too soon, the car might understeer because you took the weight off the front, or it might oversteer because you put too much power into the back end too soon. So those are examples of car control dynamics that cause new drivers, a little bit of frustration. Hopefully everybody here has enough experience to understand some of the dynamics and why these kinds of things might happen. Same thing can happen with the steering wheel, right? You can turn the steering wheel too quickly, when you're turning into a corner, and the car might understeer because you've asked the front tires to do too much work. Or it might oversteer because all of a sudden, the car is upset. So those are examples that I've stolen from Ross Bentley and other sources of, kind of, some of the dynamics that happen depending on what we as a driver do with the controls in the car. So tonight's topic is car control. Let me ask all of you, what do you think car control is? When I say car control, what does that conjure up? Anybody unmute yourself and jump in. Anybody want to volunteer their view of car control?
Knowing what happens before it happens.
Knowing what happens before it happens. I like that. Anybody else?
Dancing around a corner with your car.
Dancing, I've been listening to Ross Bentley too much, but that's some of how he kind of talks about it. Okay. Anybody else?
Reacting appropriately when what you thought was going to happen doesn't happen.
That's right. Reacting when what you wanted the car to do didn't actually work out. Yep. That's also true. Absolutely. So obviously, there's lots of ways to think about car control, but those are all as good as any definition I can come up with. Related to car control are the dynamics of what the car is doing, right? Understeer, oversteer, how balanced is it, and so on. Anyone have an example of when the car understeered when they didn't expect it, or more than they expected, that they're willing to share? Certainly happens at autocross all the time. We see it all the time. Somebody approaches a relatively slow corner too fast, turns a wheel, and the car doesn't turn. Instead, it plows ahead, right? Doesn't make the corner with the way the driver intended.
Coming out of the keyhole at Mid-Ohio.
Yep. Get on the gas a little too soon, right? And no grip left in the front, and the car just runs wide. Yep, absolutely. How about oversteer? Anybody have any oversteer examples that they're willing to admit? Oversteer is a little less predictable and a little less wanted, I would say, by most of us, at least speaking for myself. So
The poor driver in the Camaro at turn 6 at Lightning, the last event.
indeed, yes, indeed. A classic example of power oversteer, too much power too soon, and the back end gets light and goes wide while the car's not straight, and bad things happen in that example. And for that reason, Randy Popes talks about his comment is understeer is slow, oversteer is scary. And I think it's Tom, the example you cite's right on. So with all that said, let me share the screen and spend a few slides talking about car control, and then we'll talk about Thunderbolt itself turn by turn. Whoops, help if I got the right screen selected here. Okay, why is it not? Here we go. That's better. Okay, let me get somebody in here. Give me 1 minute to get adjusted here. Zoom always rearranges my screen when I would prefer it not do that. Okay, all right, so we're going to talk about car control. Normal disclaimer, anything you try based on this is your fault. So what is car control? You gave actually better definitions than some of the ones I have here, but the car does what I ask it to do or expect it to do, right? And I love to include the reminder from Dennis Mascio that says, remember, the driver's guiding, this 3,000-pound car, right? You're not telling it what to do. You're suggesting what it should do. You're guiding it. We don't, as a driver, have ultimate control. A car's going to do what it's going to do based on the physics of the situation. Another way to think about car control is, hey, the car feels good. Well, what is that? What is feel? Well, it means kind of no bad habits. It inspires confidence. It's not scary. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in just a minute. So, if we think about what the car is doing, and we think about handling, the classic definition of handling includes three things: kind of balance. Does the car feel balanced? Is it responsive? Does it turn when I turn the steering wheel? And then the amount of grip. But of course, there's trade-offs in all those things. You can improve balance and probably reduce responsiveness or reduce grip and so on. But the bottom line for most of us, at least, unless we're really, really expert drivers, is at the end of the day, we really need to have confidence in the car that we know what it's going to do when we turn the steering wheel, when we get on the brakes, when we release the brakes, and so on. And that starts with our feel, the seat of the pants. What's the car doing that we can feel through the steering wheel, the seat of the pants, and so on. Well, how do we do that? Most of you know the answer to that. How do you know if the car, or feel if the car is understeering or oversteering? Or it may do both at different times in the same corner, right? Well, one clue, if your car has PSM, is if the PSM's on, then clearly, something's going on, and hopefully you felt that. If you didn't, then that's something to pay a lot of attention. But the key thing I want to emphasize tonight is that, sensing the car, feeling the car is something that we all learn. And hopefully everybody on this call has enough experience that they've learned a lot and have a good sense of what that feel is. But there are ways to improve the feel. And you've all heard me say this 1,000 times before. I'm not going to spend a lot of time, but Ross Bentley hammers on, and I reinforce what he calls sensory input sessions, where you go on the track and you spend a whole session, just listening, trying to hear new things. You go on for a different session and you go try to feel new things in the seat of the pants, and in the steering wheel and so on. Vision, same thing. Our sight picture, is the car pointed in exactly the same direction, with the same attitude as it was last lap around. That's all part of how we know what's happening on the track. And these are ways we can improve how we sense what the car is doing. And everybody on this call has a pretty good sense in their seat of the pants, but we can all get better, right? None of us are as good as a pro at this. We can all get better. Now,
Hey, Bill, if
Yeah.
I could just make a point of this, Tom. I know this is also a pre to the theme, a Thunderbolt. I know you're going to touch on it, but since we're talking about this feel and grip and so on, I found, and I'm sure you're going to touch on it later, the Octopus is a fantastic place to practice that, because you have understeer and oversteer conditions all built into the entry, the mid corner and the exit of one turn, and it's slow speed, so there's not a lot of it's a very user friendly place to practice understeer and oversteer and working your throttle. So and you can feel things there. The track, people complain, oh, where's out my tires? Well, guess what? That's exactly a great place to figure out, what are the tires telling you? What does it feel like in your butt as you're going through that corner? So I'll leave it to you. Thanks.
No, Tom, that's a great comment. I was going to mention it in passing, but I'm glad you emphasized it, because you said it better than I was going to, and it absolutely is. Later, I'm going to talk about other ways, other places. I mean, there are very few, let me say it differently. There are very few track corners where you can experiment with the limit, and really consciously induce understeer or oversteer and get away with it. Or at least that you want to do that. But the Octopus absolutely is a place like that. You can push a little too hard and feel the front end go out. You can get on the gas a little too hard, feel the back end go out, and so on. So, Tom, absolutely correct. I'm glad you mentioned it. Now, I'm not going to spend any time tonight on the technical aspects. If what are we sensing when the car is handling? There's all kinds of things. In the slides I'm going to put on the website later tonight, there's a long appendix that includes more information of this type. But if you think about how we know what the car is doing, it's not just the yaw angle or the G loads. There's a lot of other things, and that's where the sensory input sessions really come in. Now, I've also been a broken record in the past on deliberate practice, which means practicing in a very organized way, learning the track, learning the car, learning traffic, and then sensory input. Well, this is kind of, if you're learning a new track or just want to get up to speed at an event, this is kind of the sequence you might want to do it in. But if you really want to think about deliberate practice for car control, the sequence would be different. We would do the sensory input first. So we do those sensory input sessions with vision and hearing and kinesthetics. And then we would, pay attention to exactly how we're applying and releasing the brakes, how we're applying and releasing the throttle and steering and so on. So same idea. You can take the deliberate practice worksheets that are on the website. And I know you can't read the yellow highlights here, but these are the sensory input dimensions of those worksheets, and print out a few Thunderbolt track maps and work on those, take some notes, and you'll improve your ability to feel what the car is doing and know what the car is doing. Now, I'm not going to spend any time on handling tonight beyond this slide, or maybe this slide and the next one. But if you feel like, well, first of all, no car is perfect, right? All handling is a compromise, is a trade-off. But if you can't feel what the car is doing, if the car feels okay to you, then focus on driving. If the car's behaving fine for you, focus on the driving and don't worry about the car. And you can't figure out what the car is doing handling wise unless you're very consistent on the track. If you don't enter a corner at roughly the same speed every time, how do you know whether the car's understeer was caused by what you did or something else if you're approaching it at different speeds, and so on? If you do have a handling issue, there are ways to diagnose what's going on that are in the appendix. And if you're going to make changes to the car, think about the things that are here, like balance and being careful not to just assume that somebody else's setup is the same that you want. In the appendix is from Ross Bentley, a detailed handling debrief, a whole set of steps. You can go through if you think the car isn't handling right and you want to diagnose what's going on. The simple version of that is, I just came in from a run. Was the handling better or worse? And if I made a change, was it better or worse than before the change? And if there was one thing I wanted the car to do better, what would it be? Would it turn in faster? Would it be less nervous? Whatever it is. And you can do this all with deliberate practice. But this is really more about setup and handling than car control. So let's go back to handling, well, car control issues. Obviously, most car control issues are caused by the driver. There are all kinds of causes of understeer. We talked about some of these before, right? You can get into a corner too fast, turn the car, and the car won't turn. The classic autocross experience, can easily do that at the Octopus. Get in too fast, try to turn, the car won't turn. Why is this not going? Oh, I see. If you turn in too fast or too much, again, we're asking the front tires to do too much, car will understeer. There could be too much, or not enough weight on the front tires due to getting off the brakes too quickly. That can happen at turn 5 at Thunderbolt, right? Relatively slow corner, heavy braking area. We come booking in there, slam on the brakes, and then we take our foot off the brakes. And guess what? If we don't do that gently, the front end's just going to wash right out. On the other hand, we can get too aggressive on the throttle. Lots of places at Thunderbolt we could do that, including the Octopus. You can do that at 1 even. You can certainly do that at 5, get on too much gas too soon. Or the rookie mistake is, of course, we just hold the steering wheel. We don't relax the steering wheel exiting a corner. Hopefully nobody on this call is going to make that mistake, but it does happen. How do you fix that?
Hey, Bill, I just want to interject for just real quick. So for those of you who are instructors that are on the call, those 3 points are so critical. You can take to any track, anywhere, anytime. In how do you get rid of that frustrating moment with your student, meaning the student is frustrated and you can't figure it out. And you kind of go back to the basics of those 3 points. And I can assure you that 90% of the time, 95% of the time, it's going to be one of those things that you kind of have to systematically go through your brain. Okay, did they turn the wheel too quick? Did they get on the brakes, get off the brake? And just do your mental checklist and save it for that, that talk later on. You get in the paddock or at a moment later on when you can fix it. But it's going to be one of those 3 things. And it's so easy to fix. But it's very frustrating if you don't go through that mental checklist and then go through it with the driver.
Absolutely. And let me reinforce, anyone's welcome to jump in with questions or comments at any time. Please, this is, not, I don't want it to be one way. So I appreciate Tom jumping in, but anyone else is welcome to jump in, especially if I'm saying something you don't understand or it's not as clear as you'd like. So how do we fix understeer? Tom just, was leading us here. If it's early or mid corner, we can come in slower, meaning brake earlier or harder in a straight line. Perhaps more or longer trail braking will help. Again, depends on the circumstances, right? But you often, especially if it's an inexperienced driver, a more progressive, a smoother turn in will help. Maybe a slightly later turn in. And if it's happening mid corner, then you're getting on the gas too soon. Those of you that were at pit race heard Eric Figueres, the pro who did the track walk at pit race for us. He made a comment in the middle of the track walk. I think it was on turn 4, but it could have been any place, which I think is really important. And I've heard it before, but he emphasized it. And that his point was, when you go to the gas, you should be able to get on the gas, hard. If you go to the gas, but then you have to pussyfoot around and you can't really commit to the gas pedal and squeeze the gas pedal to the floor pretty quickly, then you got on the gas too soon. And that's a really important point. And this is just an example. If you're getting on the gas hard, but then the car is understeering, guess what? You got on the gas too soon. Unless you just jumped on the loud pedal. But if you're squeezing the gas pedal properly and the car is washing out, guess what? You weren't patient enough. You got on the gas too soon. Lots of lessons here for all of us.
Yeah, that's a great point, Bill. I love that one. And for those of you who are new instructors, I see a couple faces and names there. You really got to think about which car you're in and which car you're coming from. If you're sitting in a 911 yourself and you're instructing a student in a Cayman, something's got to change. And this whole patience and on the gas is different. If you're sitting in a Cayman yourself and you're instructing someone in a 911, it's different. So you got to kind of change your perspective as to which car you're getting in if you're an instructor as to how to help them manage the gas.
Yep, absolutely. So obviously if you're in a situation in the middle of the corner and the car is understeering, all you can do is compensate by generally, straightening the steering wheel a bit, which is the opposite of what our instincts are, of course, or slow down a little bit. Maybe if it's a severe case, you might even have to use the brakes, but hopefully none of us get into that situation too much. Now, in the slides that I'm going to post, I know you can't read this, and please don't try. I'm going to include this in the slides where you can read it. And this is a really nice piece that Ross Bentley wrote in his Speed Secrets Weekly some time ago. And he talks about, how to really master exactly how much trail brake to do if the car tends to understeer when you come in. This is understeer 404, right? This is not understeer 101 or 202. Maybe it's a graduate level material on understeer and how to get better at reading the car and knowing what to do in terms of dealing with it. I don't have the time. I'm not going to take the time to go through it. It's too, you can see there's a lot here, but it's terrific stuff. And it relates exactly to what we were just talking about with understeer. So, but taken to a whole nother level, not the level a student's going to experience, a level that anyone on this call with a lot of experience can actually relate to, and to try to, teach yourself exactly how much or how little trail brake can I get away with, to optimize my way into a corner. I had saved this a while ago. I hadn't reread it for a while until I looked at it again yesterday. And it's like 5 light bulbs went on when I read it. it's really pretty cool. So flipping the coin, oversteer. Hopefully this happens less often, but it can happen. If you get into a corner, too much brake and the back end of the car wiggles around, that's oversteer. And turn 5 can happen at Thunderbolt. Turn 9, I imagine the same thing could happen potentially between 8 and 9, actually going in there. We've all heard about trailing throttle oversteer. If you get into a corner and just come off the gas, of course, now we've unweighted the back end. It's gonna step out as the weight comes off. If you're very aggressive with the braking mid-turn, potentially induce oversteer. Sometimes that's actually a good thing. If it's a little bit of oversteer, it's never a good thing if it's a lot, because a lot of oversteer is called what? A spin, right? So never a good thing. Don't have too many downhill turns to worry about at Thunderbolt. And of course, power oversteer, getting on the gas and sliding the back end out. The guys on TV like to do that. It's showy and fancy. It's not fast, and it's not really what we want to do. So how do we fix it? Generally, most oversteer situations can be solved with less trail braking. Never a guarantee. Also, with a smoother transition off the brakes. Tom was talking about instructing students. A common student mistake is just, being on heavy brakes and just taking the foot right off the gas pedal, right? Jumping off the gas pedal. Well, that'll certainly, step the back end out if you're on too much gas. So being smoother, being more progressive with the steering input can help as you're entering a corner. And if it's oversteer coming out of a corner, then, we have to use either less gas or later gas or both, and do it smoothly. Now, if it happens in the middle of the corner, everybody knows steer into the skid, but that requires practice, which you can't get on the track, except maybe at the Octopus at Thunderbolt. Correct, pause, recover. That's where CPR comes from, and not something generally that you're going to practice on the track, but you can develop that seat of the pants at places like autocross, on a skid pad, at a car control clinic, at a winter driving clinic, or even in a snow on a parking lot. That's where these kinds of things can get developed. This picture on the previous slide, if I can get it, I guess it didn't go back. This picture of my previous car going sideways is in an autocross, right? So not a great line through that corner, but I at least was correcting the car to get it pointed in the right direction. So, to summarize car control for tonight, we first have to feel or know what the car is doing. And we can always improve that with sensory input sessions. And it's really a key part of advancing our skills as we get more experience. If you think about the handling of the car and how it feels to you, you want to think about all those factors we talked about before. And there is a way to get organized on that if you're concerned about it. But we all know most handling issues in modern cars are caused by the driver, not by the car. And if you don't know how to induce oversteer or understeer, then something to work on to look for a skid pad, to try it at the Octopus, or other safe places to try it. That high-speed corner is the last place we want to develop those skills, but there are ways to do that. So with that, questions, comments that folks have on what we just covered. Hopefully some of that made sense. But questions, comments, suggestions, ideas?
So Bill, turn 16 at pit race. I went through there a few times, terrified. I was speaking to someone and they suggested that I may have been turning in too early for that. The car felt light and just not super planted. And, you know, I mean, I was fifth gear going through there.
Sure.
So I was moving pretty good and not a good feeling to be not 100% confident with,
Yep.
and I don't know if it's bravery or technique or setup.
Well, well, Tim, it could be set up, but I doubt it. If the car didn't feel planted, then one of two things. Well, first of all, those of you that weren't at pit race, turn 16 is a kink in the main back straightaway, taken very fast, as Tim said, in fifth gear in his car and in my car. And so it is entirely possible you were too early because the corner, we want to either go over the last half of the curb or alongside the last half of the curb. So it is a relatively late turn in. It's also possible that you waited too long to get back on the gas because we can trail, we can touch the brakes or lift whatever we're going to do to prepare for it, to help the car turn. But once we commit to the corner, we want to be back on the gas to plant the car. And so if you turn in and you're not committed back to the gas pedal, the car is going to feel nervous in a high speed situation like that. And it's going to feel nervous because guess what? There's not enough weight on the back of the car. Once we get back on the gas pedal, whether it's on the floor or almost, the back end of the car is going to be planted and feel a lot better than if it's not, if it's light, if you will, going in.
All right.
Make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think I was probably more early than not committed to the accelerator because I was
Okay.
straddling that entire curb on the right, basically.
Okay.
There was
Well,
more car.
then it sounds like you were early.
Right.
And early is a common mistake there because think about how our mind works. We know there's a really fast corner coming up. We know we've got to get it exactly right because it's a place, if you make a mistake, it's going to be loud and expensive. So what are our natural tendencies going to be? We're going to kind of want to do everything a little sooner than normal, right? We're going to be in a rush to get the car turned so that we do everything right. Well, so, and this is that's exactly what the chief instructor from Allegheny region, for whom it's their home track, told me when I talked to him, that, the most common mistake there is people, get early because they get nervous coming in, they get worried that it's fast and we got to do everything in a hurry and so on. So most likely it sounds like you were early, by a bit, not enough, fortunately, to cause an incident, but certainly would be enough to cause the car not to feel right, for sure. Okay.
Hey, Tim, this is Tom. I wasn't at that track. I don't know it, but I think for you and for others, a great corner to really understand how to get the car planted through can be a very, very high speed corner at T-Bolt is turn 4. And getting turn 4 right is all about, just getting the nose down, getting the car turned in. And it's that balance between, am I going to drive through this corner or I'm going to float the gas through the corner? And that happens a lot with students. For those of you who are instructors, they tend to float the gas through the corner and they're uneasy about it. And it's exactly why the car is uneasy, is because they're floating through the corner. So it's one of those corners in a user-friendly track that you can begin to experiment a little bit more about high-speed corners and how and when to plant the nose and what does gas and throttle do for me in controlling the car.
Yep. Good stuff. Okay, other comments, questions? Okay, well, with that, then let's talk about Thunderbolt. But
I have a quick question, Bill, or a quick comment if we have time.
go ahead, Zoltan.
So throttle steering. I come from autocross and also some track experience in the past. Throttle steering played a big part in autocross, but it also plays a big part in certain sections of the track, like the Octopus or Big Bend in Lime Rock Turn 1. How would you address that in finding that balance between understeer and oversteer, and how does that come into play with car control?
Well, how much time do we have? Well, let's see. Let me first say that, yes, throttle steering is a great skill to have. There are a few corners where it's really, well, let me say it differently. There are a few corners where, throttle steering is an obvious technique to use. And the ones you just cited are correct. Big Bend at Lime Rock, sections of the Octopus. Pros might argue that almost any corner, throttle steering is relevant because they're right on the ragged edge and they're controlling the car more with the gas pedal than they are with the steering. Now, most of us don't drive quite that close to the limit and don't have that level of technique. So setting that aside, assuming most of us aren't driving at that point, throttle steer is one of those seat of the pants skills that gets developed at the same places I talked about before, autocross and skid pads and so on. Those of you that have done car control clinics that I've been involved with, I always say when you're on the skid pad, I want you to lock your hands on the steering wheel and steer the car with the gas pedal, because up near the limit on a skid pad or any place else, the car is ultra sensitive to the gas pedal. It will, on a skid pad, at even low speeds, if you think about lifting your foot, the car will tuck in. If you think about squeezing your right foot down, the car will run wide. And the same thing's true near the limit on the track. So throttle steering is a big deal, but it only comes into play when we're, near the limit of adhesion, either front or back or both. Now, in terms of understeer, oversteer, it also, throttle steer only works if the car is relatively well balanced. If the car wants to understeer all day, throttle steering isn't going to help much. If the car wants to oversteer all day, it's not going to help a lot. So it only really applies in a car that's handling reasonably well. So hopefully that answers at least part of your question, Zoltan. Great. Okay. All right. So let me jump into turn by turn. Same disclaimers before. If you haven't already, before you go to Thunderbolt, go to the NNJR site and print out several copies of the Thunderbolt track map where you can make notes. It's in the track map section of the website. Hopefully everybody's doing that. Passing zones, everybody here probably knows what the passing zones are. They're, with the exception of the zone between 5 and 6, the mandatory zones in the lower groups are all right side, except the section between 5 and 6, which could be either side depending on where in the zone you give the signal. Obviously in red and black, there are additional places to pass with expanded passing. So let's talk about the corners. And thanks to Doug Holcomb for providing me some GPS overlay diagrams that made it a lot easier to draw in the line. With the caveat that the line I've shown here, I drew in freehand, so it's not perfect, but hopefully it gives you the general idea. turn one is a relatively quick corner, but it's at the end of the front straight. So we're coming from high speed into, probably in most cars, fourth to third or fifth to third gear corner. Third gear in most cars, I think. It's uphill, so that helps the car turn and get pointed some. So there's nothing magic about this, but it is a corner rather, where too many people have tried to take it too early or too fast, but especially too early. So yes, the hill will help slow down the car, but only to a certain extent. And so if we get the line right, it's a pretty quick corner. The other comment I'll make is that for some of us, if you notice the track out curb here, that curb, yes, you can run up on it as insurance if you want to do that, but there's a kind of a groove between the asphalt and the curb there that in my car and in some other cars will actually grab and kind of just, make the car want to go straight there. Now, it's not the end of the world, but it can catch you out. So just be aware that the curb there isn't as friendly as we might like. And as I'm going through here, if you have questions on any given corner, I'm going to go fairly fast, but please jump in with comments or questions as we go through. Turn two is just up the hill. There's a crest of the hill right in here, right before the apex, actually. And so it's blind. This is a blind corner. Those of you who are at pit race will have lots of practice with blind corners, but this is a blind corner where we turn in and we really don't see most of the corner at that point. And then we also have to, as we track out, we have to be aware that cars pitting out could be on our right side here, because pit out happens right opposite track out of turn two here. This corner is relatively fast, but it feels to me like the track kind of comes back a bit. So it's quite easy to overdrive this corner and get in too fast and run out of road. That said, if you get it right, it's a pretty quick corner and feeds on to a nice chute. So there's a benefit here of carrying speed once we figure the line out. Definitely a corner to turn in a bit late and apex a bit late until you really have it figured out. Turn three is a fast corner in the back, and this is a classic little bit of trail brake, not a lot of trail brake, and back on the gas. So a little bit of brake to tuck the nose in, back on the gas, apex the second part of the curb here, and track out, near the end of the track out curb in the back. Pretty quick corner in the back, and feeds on to the second chute, if you will, in the back, a longer chute between 3 and 4. So turn 4 is the one Tom mentioned before, and this is one of the few corners on the track where I'm going to suggest you do want to use the apex curb, because it does help flatten the corner out quite a bit. And this is a corner where, to Tom's point, we want to turn in, again, just like turn 3, we got to slow down a little bit more here for 4 than we might have for 3, just because we're going a lot faster. But this is still a quick corner, especially if we do two things. If we use the apex curb, number 1, and number 2, don't worry too much about our entrance to turn 5. And so if we do those two things, we slow down a bit, we turn in, we get back on the gas, as Tom suggested, run over the apex curb and carry a lot of speed, into the very short chute now between 4 and 5. So that when we get down to this area here, we're tracking out, but there's not a lot of real estate between here and 5. And so as we're going to see in a minute, that's going to position us, we won't be track right entering turn 5 if we do that. But for most people, that trade-off is one worth making. And here's turn 5, the one that lots of people overdrive because it's slower than a lot of people think. And it's a bit downhill going in, so that doesn't help either. And I mean, there's nothing particularly fancy about this corner. It's a 90-degree, roughly left-hand corner, but we're coming into it very fast. And that means we got to slow down a lot. And there's this nice long stretch after it. So we want to exit the corner fast. So this needs to be a slow in, fast out corner. So lots of brake. And as you can see, as you can see, the line that we've drawn here, we never got track right. Normally, we'd want to be over here by the turn-in point, right? Yeah, by the time we got to this point. But if we carry speed through 4, that's not possible. Yes, you can go through 4 slow enough to end up track right, but the trade-off isn't worth it. And and so almost everybody drives this to no more than the center of the track in this section here, and turning into what's a late apex on this curb, for 5, from the middle of the track, and lots of trail brake here. Yeah, it's we're scrubbing off speed. We can trail the brakes a fairly long way into this corner, before we get on the gas to come out. If I can get this to move for me.
Yeah, thanks, Bill. This corner here at 5 is one of those. I think you brought us like 2 really good points. Is when you want to travel through 4 at a higher speed, the temptation to try to get all the way track right for 5, avoid it. And students will typically do it. Oh, I got to get back to the right. No, you don't. And they think about that as like, oh, I got to get back over to the right side, and everything gets discombobulated. And a number of people will call this turn 5. I call it the autocross corner. But you do have to understand, going in slow, coming out fast, and that late apex. And that's one of the real special points about this corner when you're teaching students.
Yep. So here's an overhead of the whole complex. I guess I should have drawn the red in, so it's a little bit hard to see. But from here, you can see that the distance between 4 and 5 is pretty short. So if we come booking through 4, it's physically impossible to get back. And the speed difference between being able to book through 4 fast and end up mid-track versus slowing down enough to end up track right, the speed difference in 4 is pretty substantial. So unless you were driving a really low powered car, and even then I'm not sure, because in a low powered car, the line that's here, is shorter than getting back track right as well. So anyway, this is a bit of an unusual circumstance, but not really when you really analyze what's going on. 6 is another fairly fast right-hand corner. And I want to emphasize here, and should have on probably some of the earlier ones, the apex here is fairly long. It's not just a point in the middle of the curb. We're going to run along the curb for some distance here, 10 or 20 feet or whatever, maybe more, because we're going to brush the brakes or a little more depending how much horsepower you have, and then we're going to turn the car back in and start to squeeze the gas. It's a fast corner, and we're going to smooth it out as much as we can. Nothing. It may require a little more brake than you at first think. At first, you think it's faster than it is. At least that was my reaction when I first drove it. But it's still a quick corner. You can still get through here at a very good pace. Now, this gets into the whole area called the octopus, which most people really think of as the area in here around turn 10 and, well, 9, 10, 11A. But, this is the whole complex, seen from above, starting with 7, which kind of 7, not so much, but 8 sets up 9, 10, and 11. So 7 is another apex zone. This is a bit slower than 6. So this does require, we're going faster than we were coming into 6. And B, it's a right-hand corner, but it is slower. Notice it's almost 90 degrees. So it's a slower corner than 6, but still not a slow corner. The interesting thing here at turn 7 is that we really want to exit this and make one big arc all the way from 7 over to 9. And so this is a fairly quick section, but it takes some getting used to because it's not straight. And in particular, when we get to the end, when we get over here and we want to slow down, it's hard to figure out how to brake. So there are several strategies that can be employed over in here. One is to kind of straighten the car out a bit here and brake in a bit of a straight line before turning in for turn 9. Another one is to just trail brake gently, for a very, very long time. 9 is a very slow corner that we're entering. 8 is this kind of big arc. So it almost, I don't even think of it as a corner. I just think about how do I get from 7 to the braking zone for 9. But, thinking about what our braking zone is going to be as we get over here and how we're setting up 9, a very slow corner, is what this section is all about. And again, depending on how fast we come through here, is going to influence kind of and how our car behaves. And think about car control. If you're comfortable, kind of slowing the car down a lot, with partial brake while you're turning, then you can, slow the car down on kind of this line right here. If you're not comfortable doing that, or your car doesn't feel comfortable to you doing that, then you're going to have to straighten the wheel some at some point here to slow the car down and then turn right into turn 9. All right. So
if I can add just to that corner, one of the, I think I see 1 or 2, if not 2, first-time instructors on this call. One of the big things that happens at that turn-in that Bill's drawing the line on, 2 things tend to happen. We tend to put a cone, or the track tends to put a cone out in the horizon on the left side of the track at that turn-in point. And many students get fixated on that cone and lose track of where the turn-in is. So it's kind of like an orientation point. I think the biggest is one of the corners that is the most inconsistent corners, where students will constantly, they're on the left or on the right or in the middle, they turn in early, turn in late, is get them to turn their head to the right. See that corner, that cone out in the distance? Yeah, it's fine. It's something that's out there. But look at their head. If they turn their head to the right, they can really master that turn in and roll the car into that corner. Look for that. Look at them. Look at their head. Look at their eyes. Thanks.
Yep. No, that's great input. That's great input.
Bill, just a quick question for you. Just the curb on the inside, the line you've got there is quite a long way from that curb. So we should just ignore that curbing on the inside and try and stay out there.
Oh, the curbing in here, Grant?
And yeah, in the middle of the curve there.
It really depends on what arc you and your car like. And I would ignore the curbing, yes. If the arc that your car likes gets you close to it, fine. I haven't driven Thunderbolt in in a few years, so I actually don't remember for sure how close to that curb I was. The key thing is how much pace can I carry on a nice, arc that the car likes through here. So this is car and driver dependent, and if you find a line that you and the car like, then go for it, because it's obviously a curvy section. We can't just straighten the front wheel and put our right foot down. So we're just trying to carry as much pace as we can up to the braking zone for 9. And so I don't think there's one solution here, Grant, for everybody.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, sorry, Tom, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, so exactly as you were saying, Bill, depending on the car and the speed, depending which car I drove in the past, I tried to get closer and then inching out to the left slowly. The next section, as you go into 9, you're going to feel how much you're fighting your car. And it's going to be really difficult if you overdrive it, or you are too close or too far from the ideal point and balance of the car. So once you really get to that right turn into 9, you're going to have to modify your next lap to go away from this fighting the car, need to brake extra, and not being able to smoothly transition to the left into 10. It's really a little bit of a trial and error.
Right. I mean, there is, to Grant's point, I mean, there is, I don't know that I can show it very well. I think you can see my pointer on the screen, but there is a line. You could make an arc that starts at the same point as the current red line, but that came in closer to the curb and then comes out further here, not all the way track left, but closer to where the end of this arrow is, and then make a more distinct turn in for turn 9. There is, and obviously we're braking in this section anyway. So that kind of line allows you to relax, open the wheel a bit, brake in a little bit more of a straight line to scrub off some speed and then trail in. So there are a variety of options to think about here. And if you're not comfortable with the one you're doing or not sure, you can always try, different options, through here. So
yeah. I think that's a good. And both Laszlo and Bill, I mean, I can remember when we first went to T-Bolt, it was, let's double apex this, and that's kind of where they, in some cars probably it made sense. You got that first set of rumble strips. But you can see exactly where you have your arrowhead there, Bill. There's like a dirt patch, and a lot of people, well, the racers mainly, because they're trying to protect the inside.
yeah, right here.
But,
Yeah.
Yeah. So they kind of create, and I know in my car, whether I was in my GT3 or now in a GT4,
Yeah.
I want to travel as fast as I can around that whole arc, and then get to the car to the right around where you have the arrow point and that turn in, and get the car straight, get the brakes, and then trail in. But again, when we're all high-level drivers here, so you have to balance that with your car. And those of you who are first-time instructors, it's forget that first set of rumble strips. Just get them around the corner and turn their head, because they're lost. Just get them to turn their head at the turning point.
Yeah, good point.
Yeah,
Guys,
that
I have a
turning
question.
the head, that's a good message to all of us, but fully agree, Tom. Literally, the student has to find me. Look at me. If you don't see my helmet, forget it. You're gonna go straight, and we're gonna have to stop.
Spot on. Absolutely. Look at me. That's a very, very good little hint there. That's good.
That's good. Somebody else had a comment.
Yeah, just a quick question. This in turn 9, is it not a little bit off camber if you go out to the right, the left side? Is it off camber a bit, if I remember? Or
Turn
9.
Turn 9. Well, it's let me go to turn 9. I don't remember it's certainly not helpful out there. So whether it's off camber or not, I don't remember, to tell you the truth, but there is absolutely no reason in the world that we want to be track left here as we get into 9, right? This is a very slow corner, especially since we've now just finished a whole bunch of fast corners. It catches people out and people want to overdrive it. But we really just want to follow this curbing around. And let me back up for 1 second here. If you look from the overhead here at the whole complex, this is 9, right? And we're headed down here. Well, the natural way, what we, if we just wanted to drive 9, ignoring, and we thought there was a straightaway after, we'd apex it somewhere back here, and we get on the gas and we end up over here someplace. Well, but notice how much the track comes back to the right here. I mean, this is a sharp corner when you consider how much it comes back here, way over 90 degrees, probably close to 120 degrees by the time we're done here. So that's the reason why, if I go the right place here, why we want to stay along this curbing for a long time before, so that we can eventually make a straight line down to this apex down in here. But where I showed the track out arrow on this overhead, that's the track out for 9. But look how far down that is, right? And the reason we're doing that is we're trying to make a straight line from the exit of 9, which is essentially the end of the curbing, all the way to this point. We certainly don't want to be over we don't want to be over in this part of the track at all. We don't want to be track left anywhere in here, because we're traveling more distance, we're making the corner sharper. So that's why the line is very, if you will, odd, if you want to think about it that way, in 9, where we're basically following this curbing all the way around until we can see, if you will, the beginning of turn 10. And when people first come to Thunderbolt, they overdrive this corner thinking, well, I can make some speed up. Well, doesn't work. And you can see that here in this overhead of 10. We want to approach it in a straight line from the exit of 9, and we're pretty much going to hug the curbing around here as well. There's not much percentage in getting very far outside of this curve. Some cars will, I see some drivers will be, way, in the right-hand half of the track here, trying to get the car turned and pointed up the track more. But notice, this is a long corner, and it's even worse than that because of where 11A is, right? So, the line here really is pretty much around the curbing. And to Tom's earlier point, you think about this from a car control point of view, what does this look like? It looks like a big skid pad. You can easily experience understeer and oversteer and feel how well the car is balanced going around here, because you get on a little too much gas, the front end's going to wash out. You get on way too much gas, and you'll slide the back end out. Mm-hmm. So and here in this diagram in particular, you can really see how much it looks like a big wide skid pad.
And to your point, Bill, earlier, unless something changed, what I meant to your earlier point, I myself didn't drive it for a few years. Last time I was there in a fully modified Boxster race car, what I noticed that very close to the curbing, or right on the curbing, and at least in that particular car, there was a significant amount of grip very close to the curbing. And quite frankly, it felt the car was on rails. The further I went out to the right, I felt that I was losing a little bit of a momentum and also less traction. But it's a little bit of a foot right or 2 feet or whatever works for the car. It's a little bit of an experimentation, and absolutely, as you were saying, and Tom before, the skid pad and throttle steering is going to be very important in this turn.
Yep. I think your point about if there is any favorable camber or whatever, it's certainly over in this area here. I mean, if you look at the tire marks in this section of the curbing, the curbing's all black typically in here because everybody's running right up on the curb. So it certainly felt to me like the grip, the most grip was right in tight here, less obvious, in through here, but this is pretty flat. There's not much favorable camber either way that I remember. And so there's certainly no gain being out here that I'm aware of. And you're just going more distance, making, your life that much harder, in my opinion.
And pointing out the black tire markings in general, not just for ourselves as good marker points, but for the students to kind of support what you're trying to teach them. It's fairly obvious, to your point, Bill, where the racers are putting the cars.
Yep.
It's very, very easy to spot them and show them, and that can help also memorize a little bit better, especially in the early runs where there's so many different things they need to remember.
Yep. Let me back up just 1 second. I want to point out here, that, the reason one of the reasons we hug this exit curb longer than we might think in 10 is notice what happens in 11A. Well, before 11A, the track, continues to come back on us past this curb. So if we started to accelerate hard exiting out of 10, we end up over here, when in fact, we kind of want to be track left to set up this complex. So this is another case, just like 9, where we have to hold the apex longer than we might think, because of the section that follows, which is 11A and 11B, because, this sets up the whole front straight. And to enter 11A properly, we need to be track left, which means we need to hold that apex in 10 much longer than we might think before we get back on the gas. And then if we do that properly, now we can be on the gas, through 11A and 11B and set up the front straight. So the whole series of connected corners, and you kind of have to work backwards to understand why the line is where it is.
Bill?
Yep.
My observation from driving the Octopus was this is where people who have a little more car control experience, like the autocrossers, have a slight advantage because they understand the interconnectedness of the corners, plus this whole being able to use their throttle to get around there. This is what separates the autocrossers from the boys. I mean, from the track drivers.
Well, I won't disagree with that. So certainly autocross experience helps the first few times you see this, for sure. So 12, last corner, fast late apex corner that leads onto the front straight. This is the other place where we can use the lower part of the curb, to come on the front straight, but we want to use it carefully. If you're early on turn 12, then drive the car off, slow down in the grass, slow down some more, and then think about getting back on. This corner eats cars, right? Because if you misjudge it, you don't, and try to keep the car on the track, nothing good's going to happen. So it's a fun corner. It's fast, but it requires the appropriate respect since it is a fast corner, and the curb, depending on how you hit the curb. I mean, if you hit it properly, it's in most cars, it's not going to upset the car. But if you hit too much curb, it can upset the car, or if you hit it at the wrong angle. So not a corner to be early, but a fun corner done properly, and carrying speed out of out of 11A and 11B. All right. So just to summarize, a few cautions. We've talked about all these. Don't early apex one, watch track out or pit out cars coming into turn 2. Turn 5, slow in, fast out. Don't overdrive the octopus. Randy Pope's fastest way through a slow corner. Slow. It's a slow corner. 12, don't be early. Watch out for that high curb. And any place on Thunderbolt or any track for that matter, if you're early or too fast, just drive the car off, slow it down some more, then count to 10, and then think about coming back on. But that, everybody on this call should kind of know that. So with that, questions, comments before we wrap up? Hopefully
Bill, is there a copy of these slides, which were very helpful, thank you, in the track pack?
they're not in the track pack, Grant. They will be on the website hopefully later tonight, or if not, then tomorrow morning. If you go to the the turn-by-turn slides, an earlier version is on the website now in the turn-by-turn section. I will have this updated set there as soon as I can get them there. And the other slides, the car control slides, will be in the classroom section of the. If you go to the NNJR DE page and look for the classroom section, you'll find these as soon as I get them up there.
Okay,
So
thank you.